Begin today the Gemara on the Tzadik Aleph, right at the beginning of the Yamud. The Gemara continues here with different halachas related to selling things to make sure that everyone has available what they need to eat and so on. In connection to what we learned before about selling and not deceiving someone when you sell, and everything should be honest. So the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a Braisa, Ein mistakrim be'Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to make a profit b'dvarim sheyesh ben chaye nefesh, when it comes to things that are needed for basic living. Kagain, yena is shmana masalta is wine, oil, and flour. What this means is, Rashbam explains that the people that are producing the wine, they should be the ones selling the wine. Don't sell the wine to another merchant, and then that other merchant is the one that goes and sells it in the marketplace. Because then there's a person in between that has to make an additional profit, and therefore you're charging people more. You should allow the Bava Basra himself that produced the wine or the oil or the flour, that he should sell it directly, so there shouldn't have to be another margin of profit for someone else in between.
No middleman.
No middleman, right. Amru Olav Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. But it was said though about Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Shahayim mistakri b'yayin v'shemen, that he did sell, he was a middleman, and he did sell wine and oil for a profit. Why was this? Why didn't he follow what it says here in this Braisa? B'yayin, because regarding wine, Savala Rabbi Yehuda, or we had before was Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. The Gemara before said that Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira holds that it's better that there shouldn't be too much wine. Too much wine is also not good. And b'shemen, regarding oil, ba'asri Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, in the place where Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lived in Eretz Yisrael, shchiach mishche. There was more than enough oil, so allowing him to make a profit on the oil was not a problem. Tana Rabbanan, and another Braisa we learned a similar thing. Ein mistakrin pamayim bebeitzim. You're not allowed to make a profit twice when it comes to eggs. Okay, so the Gemara explains what this means. There are two pshatim what this Braisa meant to say. Oma Mari bar Mari, Pligiba Rav Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel argued what this Braisa means. Chad Omar al Chad Trei. One said that the meaning is that you shouldn't sell eggs for double the price that you bought it for. So even though you could make a higher profit than what it said before the Gemara said that when you make a profit and you sell, you should only make a profit up to a sixth. Here, the Rashbam says eggs are different. Eggs is not mamish chaye nefesh. It's not basic living that you need to live with. So you're allowed to make more of a profit, but not double the price of what you bought it for. That's one pshat. V'chad omar, another pshat, tagal etagre, that you shouldn't have two different merchants that are buying it, not only one middleman, but a second middleman. You have one person, let's say the person that he has the eggs in the farm, then you sell it to another general distributor, and then you give that distributor gives it over to a store. So you have two people that are in the middle, so then it ends up being even more expensive. Even one person in between is fine, but not two. Tana Rabbanan, in a Braisa we learned, Masriyin al Prakmatye, you're allowed to daven for the problems that there are in business when people are having big losses in business, when the prices are dropping, and therefore everyone is losing money in the things that they're selling. So you're allowed to daven for this, Va'afilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos. Even though Shabbos is not a time to daven for your business and things like that, but nevertheless, if there's such a great loss that people are having, even on Shabbos you're allowed to daven for this. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, so Rabbi Yechanan explains, Kagayin kli pishton beBavel, like for example, the linen clothing that was sold in Bavel, it was a very common business that people had. In Bavel there was a lot of this pishton, and therefore people were selling pishton, and if the price of the pishton drops, so everyone's going to be losing a lot of money. Or v'yayin v'shemen be'Eretz Yisrael, or the price of wine or oil that dropped in Eretz Yisrael. Now, Amar Rav Yosef explains, v'hu dizol v'kam asara b'shita. That's only if the price drops drastically. It drops almost down to half, from 10 to 6. And even on Shabbos, you're allowed to daven for this. Tana Rabbanan, and another Braisa we learned, Ein yotzin me'eretz l'chutz la'aretz. You're not allowed to leave from Eretz Yisrael to chutz la'aretz. And the Rashbam explains the reason why you shouldn't leave from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz is because you're taking yourself out from a place where you can fulfill all the mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael. That's the reason that Rashbam gives. Other Rishonim in other places give other reasons. There's also a Gemara in the end of Ksubis that speaks about this at length, about leaving Eretz Yisrael. That it's an Isser to leave Eretz Yisrael because of the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. Kedusha is a land that they chose for Yidden Dafke. This is one of the reasons that the Rebbe gave a few times when people asked him why he doesn't come to Eretz Yisrael. He says if he would come, then it's a problem to leave. So here the Gemara speaks, we'll see here, the Gemara speaks very harsh things about a person that leaves Eretz Yisrael, even in a time when it's difficult to stay in Eretz Yisrael, but one should not leave Eretz Yisrael. So the Braisa here says, Ella and Cain, unless Amdus Hasayim Besela. When the price of buying wheat becomes so expensive that to buy 2 sa'ah of wheat is at the price of a selah, then that's an expensive price. At that point, you're allowed to leave. But Omar Rab Shimon said, Amesai, but when is this true that you're allowed to leave? Is man she'ena moitzalikach. If you can't, there isn't anything available to buy. The point there is that it's a very expensive price and you can't find anything to buy. But even if it's an expensive price, but there is available still wheat to buy, then afila amda sa b'sela lo yetze. So then, even if the price of a saw, just one saw, is a selah, so it's more expensive, still you should not leave Eretz Yisrael lo yetze. You shouldn't leave. Rab Shimon ben Yochai said as well regarding the story of Rus, which is when there was a hunger, and then Elimelech and his 2 children of Machlon and Vikilyaim. They were the great people in the generation. They were the leaders of the Eden in that time. And then when there was a hunger, they left to Moav. Why were they punished? And then in Moav, the pasuk says that Elimelech died and the Machlon and Kilyan died. Why was this? That's because they left from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. Even though they left because there was a hunger, but nevertheless they shouldn't have left. Shenemar. Now, according to the Marsha, he takes out the word Shenemar because it's not a raya to what it said before, but it's bringing another pasuk in Rus to explain in connection to what we just learned. Vateya im kol ha'ir. This is later on over there in Rus where the pasuk describes regarding Nomi, the wife of Avimelech. Vateya im kol ha'ir. Everybody was wondering alei and regarding them. Vatemarna, and they said Hazois Nomi. Is this Nomi? What were they wondering about Nomi? My Hazois Nomi. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Amru, they said, Chazisem Nami, did you see Nami? She yatzes ma'aretz l'chutz la'aretz. She left from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz la'aretz. Ma al-salah. What was her end? What happened to her? Her husband died, her 2 children died. So this is all happened because she left Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Oisa ayayim, and that day, Shabbos, Rus Hamivia, Eretz Yisrael, so Nami came back with her daughter-in-law, Rus. And that day that she came back to Eretz Yisrael, and what ended up happening? Rus ended up getting married to Boaz, right? So on that day that she came back, Meisa Ishtoy Shel Boaz. The first wife of Boaz passed away. This is a saying that people say, until even before the one that passes away, his wife passes away, Kaime Mane Beisa. The Eibishter already appoints someone else that will take care of the home, Keres Abayis, which is his new wife, Rus, that was here already available to come and marry him. Amar Rav Baravona, in connection to this, said in the name of Rav, Ivtzon, which is the name of a person that it speaks about in the Sefer of Shoftim. He was one of the judges in that time of Yidden. Who was this Ivtzon? Zeb Boyaz. Ivtzon is Boyaz. Says the Gemara, Mai Kamash Malon. What is it saying with this when it says that Ivtzon is Boyaz? Says the Gemara, Ki Idach, the Rabbi Baravona, it's telling us something that's related to something else that Rabbi Baravona said. The Rabbi Baravona Marav, Meya ve'esrim mishtois asa Boyaz Labanov. 120 festive meals Boyaz made for the sake of his children. And as we'll see here, this is for the sake of his children that he made these big meals for them for their chasana, that he married off. What does this mean? Shanama, the pasuk says, Vayehiloi, that Ivtzon, which was Boyaz, he had shloishim banim u'shloishim banais. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters. Sholach hachutza, he sent them out. Shloishim banais, hevi lebanov, and then he brought daughter-in-laws, 30 daughter-in-laws for his sons, minachutz from outside. Okay, so, and then when he married them off, so he made big chasanas for them. So according to the Rashbam's pshat, what the Gemara is saying is that he made a chasana at the time of the Edison, which is at the first stage of marriage, by the Kiddushin, and then he made another big meal for them at the time of the Nisuin. So for each one of them, so it's 30 boys and 30 girls, he made 120 big chasanas for them. And the pasuk says that Vayishpet es Yisrael Sheva Shanim, that he was a judge. He judged Yidden for 7 years. Here the Gemara says, "B'chol achas v'achas," for each one of them, asa shnei mishtois, he made big meals for them, two meals for them. Echad b'beis aviv, one was in their father's home, v'echad b'beis chomav, and one was in their father-in-law's home. Some that are not guided, this last line over here in the Gemara. And the Dikduke Seifrim, he says not to be guided it because it doesn't really fit with what the Rashbam says and with what other Rishonim. There are other Rishonim actually that say that the two mishtois that it says he made for them, one was when they were born, and another was by their chasana. What it says here, Beis Aviv, Beis Chomav, is not the pshat of the Rashbam, it's not the pshat of other Rishonim, it could be that they weren't gaidises. Okay, now, Bekulan, all of these meals that he made for his children, Loizimin es Manoyach. Manoyach, which was the father of Shimshon, which was also living at that time in Sefer Shoftim, he did not invite Manoyach to any of the chasanas. Why not? So Manoyach at that time didn't have any children yet. So Omar, Boya said to himself, Kudna Akara, this mule, which has no children, but my parali, how is he going to pay me back? If I'm going to invite him to my chasanas, but he has no children that he's marrying off, and I'm not going to get invited to any of his chasanas, how is he ever going to pay me back? So therefore, I'm not inviting him to my chasana. That's what Boya said. The Marsha here asks on this Gemara, how could this be? Boyaz was a big tzaddik. He was a shayfit in those times. How could it be that Boyaz is saying such a cruel thing? So the Marsha explains, because the Seder is, and the Gemara speaks about this in other places, when you invite someone to a chasana, they come and they give sivloinus, they give you gifts when they come to the chasana. He didn't want to receive a gift without being able to return and give back when he makes a chasana, and I give back a gift. That was usually the Seder. The Gemara says, Saina matanas yichya, that you're not supposed to take a gift without paying back. So therefore he says, I don't want to invite him, and then I'm going to get a gift, and he's not going to want to receive a gift back from me, and he's not going to be making a chasana that I'll have an opportunity to give him back a gift. So I don't want him to come and give me a gift, and I don't want to take a gift without being able to give back to him. That was his kavanah. But nevertheless, Menoyach,
doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, but that's the pshat that the Marsha says on this, because otherwise it's very hard to understand how Boyaz would do something like this. But nevertheless, the fact is, Menoyach did get hurt from this, that he wasn't invited to all these weddings. So therefore it says that Tana, we learned about this in a Braise, that V'kulon Meisu B'chayav, that all of these 60 children that he had ended up dying in Boyaz's lifetime. And V'hainu Damri Inchi, this is what people say, B'chayecha de Yaldes, in your lifetime, if you give birth, shittin, to 60 children, shittin lamalech. How do you know that these 60 children will be any worth to you? Ichbul va'oilet chad, you should go and marry, even if these children, you have already these 60 children, go and marry another wife, and then have another child, the mishittin zadas. That other child that you'll give birth to may be better than these 60 children that, like in this case, that Boyaz went, and he had 60 children. The Rashbam here says that the 60 children that he had were still living after his wife passed away, and he married Rus. Those 60 children were still alive. But he still went and got married to Rus to have another child, which eventually, what happened to that other child who was born from there? David HaMelech. So David HaMelech that came from this child that was born from Rus was more and better than all of those 60 children that he had before that passed away in his lifetime as a punishment for what happened there, because he didn't invite Manoyach to the chasanas of those children.
Why was he supposed to invite him?
Why what?
Why was he supposed to invite him?
Manoyach was a person in the community and a good friend. Apparently, it was at the same time, the same time period. They were living all in Israel together. Yeah.
They're both judges also.
Okay. Yeah. Manoyach was a judge. I'm not sure if Manoyach was a judge. I don't remember. I don't think so.
His son.
Well, Shimshon was Shafet didn't right. I don't think Manoyach was. Okay. Now the Gemara brings a siman for what it says in the continuation of the Gemara here. Siman Melech Avram Es Shanim Sheniftar Nisnasa Levade. Omarav Chonan Bar Rava Omarav Elimelech, which is who we spoke about before, and Vishalmoin, which is also mentioned there in the Sefer of Rus, and Pliny Almoini, which is another individual which is not even being named. He's just mentioned unnamed. And Vavi Nami, and the father of Nami. Kulan b'nei Nachshon ben Aminadav. They were all descendants of Nachshon ben Aminadav Hain. Okay, so the Gemara says, "My kamash malon." What is he trying to say with this? Shafila mi sheyesh lo schus avos, even someone that has schus of his ancestors, but nevertheless, eina oimedes lo b'shashe yotzim aretz l'chutz ha'aretz. That schus that he has is not going to help him if he leaves Eretz Yisrael, as we see with the case of Elimelech, that he left Eretz Yisrael and he passed away, even though he came from Nachshon ben Aminadav. Rav Chanan bar Rava Omarav. The Gemara here will bring different statements, the same Amoira, Rav Chanan bar Rava and the name of Rav, not all related. So he says different interesting things about the names of people in Tanakh. So first he says that Imei de Avraham. What's the name of the mother of Avraham? Avinu doesn't mention in Torah. Amasloi bas Karnabai. Imei de Haman. The name of Haman, of the mother of Haman rather, that is a similar name. Amasloi bas Urvasi. Now, because they have similar names, Visimonech, the simon to remember the difference with the name of Avram's mother and Haman's mother, Tomei, and Tar. What's impure is impure, what's pure is pure. So the Rashbam says that Orvisi is a oirev, a raven, which is not pure. And the term, or the word Karnavai, is connected to tzayin, to sheep. Tzayin kodim. The word kodim is in relation to sheep. Karnavai is related to that word, which is pure, which is kosher. Now, Imei de David, who was the mother of David? Nitzeves bas Adoil. Shema, that was her name. Imei de Shimshon, what was the name of Shimshon? Tzlalfinus. And the Achse, and his sister, was Nashyan. Now, Lamai Nafkimene, why is he mentioning all of this? Who is the mother of Avram, and so on? Says the Gemara, L'tshuva Saminim. It's being mentioned to be able to answer those minim, those apikarsim that ask and say, who are the mothers, who's the mother of Avram? That we have a Messiah and we can answer and say, we know the lineage and we know who the mother of these individuals are. 10 years, Nachbash Avram Avinu was imprisoned. Shalosh Bekuta, 3 was in the city of Kuta, and Vesheva Bekardu, and another 7 in the city Kardu. So the Mefarshim say, maybe it's the Mashai that says that, the Gemara says in another place that Avram Avinu at the age of 3 already recognized the Eibishter, and he began breaking the idols in his father's house by Terach. So from the age of 3, he was imprisoned until the age of 13. Until the age of 13, they didn't want to punish him because it's before the age of being an adult, before the age of bar mitzvah as well. So therefore he was imprisoned for 10 years. And then after 10 years is when the story was that they threw him into the furnace, into a fire, and that's when the nest was that his life was saved. But for 10 years he was imprisoned. But Rav Dimi ben Erda Masni, Rav Dimi from Erda says Ipche, that it's the opposite, that it was 7 years in Kuta and 3 years in Kardu. Amr Rav Chizde said, Ibra Zeira de Kuta, a certain city in Kuta, Zeo Ur Kastem. That is where Ur Kastem is, where Avram Avinu was thrown into the fire. The day that Avram Avinu passed away from the world, all the great people of the time stood in a line, and they said, woe to the world that lost its leader, and woe to the world the boat that lost its captain. Mashal says that one is Avram Avinu's leadership in his seichel and the way he taught people about the Eibishter, and the other one is his leadership like a person that's a captain of a boat, which is more his connection, the way he led people on an emotional level, and midas. Another thing that Rav Chanan darshaned, v'hamasnase l'choy l'roish. What does this pasuk mean? Omer Rav Chanan bar Rava, Omer Rav, that afil reish gargusa, even a person that's just being appointed over a pit of water, that he's the one that's in charge to give the water for the fields. So it's a very small job, but he's appointed for this. He's being appointed from heaven. That's what it means. Any job, it comes from the Eibishter. This is going back to what it said before about Elimelech and so on, that they left Eretz Yisrael, and because they left Eretz Yisrael, that's why he died. So Rabbi Shua ben Karcha actually disagrees with this. Chas v'shalom, that no, God forbid to say that he left Eretz Yisrael, even though there was still food available. It was a time of a hunger, but there was still food available, and because he left Eretz Yisrael, that's why he passed away. That's not the reason. Because sha'afila matzah subit, even if he would have found very low grade, very low quality of grain still in Eretz Yisrael available, lo yotzim. Elimelech and Machlin and Kilyan, which were the Gedolei Adar, they wouldn't have left. Why were they punished then when they left Eretz Yisrael? The reason is because they should have davened for the sake of their generation, and v'loy bikshu, they didn't daven. Shenema, the pasuk says, "B'zakech yatziluch kibutzayich," that if you daven, you scream to the Eibishter will save all the Yidden that are gathered together. They didn't daven enough, and that's why they were punished. This halacha that it said here about not leaving Eretz Yisrael, this was only said in a case of Elo Mois B'Zoil, when money is available and people can come on money very easily. Paid is b'yoker, but the actual produce is very expensive. There's a high inflation and people can't pay the price, and therefore people don't have what to eat. But if money, it's hard to come on money. People are not making an income. Even if the price is that is 4 saw you get for a sela, yoitzin, meaning this is a cheap price. Before the Gemara mentioned a more expensive price. Even if the price is cheap, but people don't have money, so then yoitzin, you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so the main thing over here is when you have a heter to leave Eretz Yisrael, is you don't necessarily look at the price of the produce, but you have to look at whether people have money to buy or not. And the Gemara brings what happened by Rabbi Yechanan. And here the Gemara brings from Rabbi Yechanan different things. And the Gemara gives a simon for this. Simon sela poel charuva talia omrin. The Amar Rabbi Yechanan said, Nahirna kadhava, I remember, kadhava kaimin arba sa'im besela. I remember when the price of the grain was cheap. You can buy 4 saw for 1 sela, but still, v'hava nefishi nefiche kafan betveria. There were still many people in the city of Tveria that they were swollen from hunger, that they didn't have what to eat because they had no money to buy anything. Mideles isra, they didn't have even a isra, a small coin in their pocket to buy anything. Rabbi Yechanan said, Nahirna, I remember, kadla mizgir in Payala, that workers did not want to be hired lemidnach karte, to do work in the east of the city, and the reason is because there's a western wind that blows to the east, and mireach pita, and then that western wind brings the aroma of the pita, the bread that's being baked, and maisen, and they didn't have anything to eat, and they smelled this, and then it just brought them to die. Rabbi Yechanan says, and here he brings what he remembers from the good times. Now here now, I remember kadava botza yenuka charuva, when a child would crack open a carob, and have a nogit chute the dufshal train droi, and it was such a good geschmack carob that there was honey, two rows of it was dripping from the honey of it that was dripping down on his arms. Rabbi Lazar says, now I remember could have a notel urva bisra, when a raven grabbed a piece of meat and the raven then flew with it on top of a wall, and the nugget chute the mishche, and it was dripping down from the fats of this meat, mereish shuravad lara, from the top of the wall where the raven was all the way down to the ground. That's how fat the meat was. Rabbi Yechanan says, I remember nahirna kadav metailin talia v'talyase b'shuke, that there was young boys and girls that were taking walks together in the street. They were like 16 or 17 years old. Even though it was boys and girls together, but nevertheless they would not sin. There are some that say that this is showing on the fact that they were on a high level. This was good times and they didn't have any taiva to sin. And there's others that say that it was because the times were so bad and therefore they had no ability. They were so persecuted that therefore there was no sinning then. Rabbi Yechanan says, I remember kadava omrim be medrasha, and when it was said in the Beis Medrash, the Maidi Lahain Nafal B'Yidayan. Someone that, when Yidden are agreeing to what the Goyim say, they're just following and agreeing them, you're going to end up falling into their hands. The Misrachis Aleya, if you rely on the Goyim, delay the Lahain. Whatever is yours will end up being theirs. You don't rely on the Goyim, you rely on the Eibishter, and you don't agree to what they are. The Yidden have to believe in the Eibishter and rely on the Eibishter. Now going back to the story we mentioned before about Elimelech and his 2 sons, Machloin and Kilyoin, that left Eretz Yisrael, and they were punished for this. So the Gemara says, Ksiv, the pasuk in Rus says that their names were Machloin and Kilyoin. But Ksiv, in Divrei Hayamim, when it speaks about them, it gives them different names. It says that their names were Yoyav, or Yoyash, and Visarov. So they had different names. So Rav Shmuel argued about this. Chadama, one says Machlan v'Kilyan Shmon. Their real name was Machlan and Kilyan. Why do they have these other names? Because they gave up hope of redemption. There was a hunger, and they said, "Forget it. We can't be in Eretz Yisrael." They gave up and they left. And Saraf means that because of this, their punishment was that they were burnt. They passed away. Another opinion was Yoyash v'Saraf Shman. Their actual name was Yoyash and Saraf. Why do they have the name of Machlon and Kilyon? Machlon she'asa gufon chulin. They turned their body to being mundane by leaving Eretz Yisrael, a holy place, into Chutz La'aretz. And the Kilyon she'nischayvu kloya lamakim. That they then their punishment was that they were annihilated. They took away their life. Tanya command Omar Machlon and Kilyon Shman. In a Braisa, we learned like the opinion that says that their actual names was Machlon and Kilyon. The Tanya, because in a Braisa it says, "My dechsiv." What's the meaning of the pasuk? And here this Braisa explains the entire pasuk where it mentions their names as being Yoyesh and Saraf. So that pasuk begins and says, "Vayoikim," V'yoikim, that is, and that's the name of a person. The Gemara will soon explain who this is. And Va'anshe Kuziba, and V'yoyash, V'saraf, Asher Ba'alu L'mayav, they were in Mayav, and Vayashuvi Lochem, V'hadvarim Atikim. Okay, the Gemara will explain this entire pasuk. So V'yoikim, when it says here Yoikim, who is this? Zeh Yeshua. This is referring to Yeshua ben Nun. Why? Shehekim Shvua La'anshe Givan, because he established a shvua. He made an oath and he promised the people of Givon when they came to convert, and he said that they'll be protected. That's why he's got this nickname of Yoikim. Anshe Kuziba, who are the Anshe Kuziba? Elo Anshe Givon. These are these Gadim that came from Givon. Shekazvu b'Yeshua. They fooled Yeshua because they weren't really sincere in them becoming Gadim.
This expression.
Yeah, it's right. Rashi mentions it yesterday regarding the Gevinim, that they were all appointed later to be water carriers and so on. Yeah. And then the Yoyesh v'Saraf, who are they? Elo Machlan v'Kilyain. This is, as we mentioned before, Machlan and Kilyan. Here the Braisa says the pshat that was mentioned before. V'Laman Ikishman Yoyesh v'Saraf. Why did they get these two nicknames? Yoyesh and Yashim and Agula. They gave up hope on redemption, and Saraf shenis Chai v'Sreif L'Makim. That they Eibishter burnt them. They took away their life. Then when it says afterwards, Asher Ba'alu L'Mayav, what does this mean? Shenasun Nashim Mayaviyos. That Machlan and Kilyan left Eretz Yisrael and they got married to women when they were there in Mayav. Rus and Orpah. They got married there in Mayav. And then when it says in the pasuk Vayashuvi Lochem, what does this mean? Zu Rusa Mayaviyah. This refers to Rus. Sheshava, she returned. She returned. Lochem means that she returned. V'nidbeka bebeis Lechem Yehuda. She returned to Beis Lechem and she connected to Yehuda. She got married to Boaz, that was from Shevet Yehuda. And then the pasuk concludes V'hadvarim Atikim. What does Hadvarim Atikim mean? Dvarim alalu Atik Yemaya Omran. That it says here in the pasuk, and this is the Eibishter made this happen. This comes from Atik Yomim. What does Atik Yemaya literally mean? It's from the ancient days. This is all. The story begins already a long time before. What does it mean? A long time before, because the Boaz married Rus, that comes from Mayav, and where does this begin from? From the daughters of light. Chsev Matzasi David Avdi. When it says in the pasuk Matzasi David Avdi, this is the Eibishter all orchestrating from years before the lineage from where David HaMelech will come from. And that began from the story after Zdaim with the daughters of light, and then from there also Rus, and from this comes David HaMelech. And this comes from the level of Atik Yomin. As it's explained in Chassidus here, the Yetzer Hara tries always to prevent the birth of Mashiach in the world. And Mashiach comes in the world in a very hidden way through the daughters of light and through Rus, which was Megayer, and then by the birth of David HaMelech, and from there comes Matzasi David Avdi, which goes on Mashiach.
So we see that at least by one of the two that left from Moav, there was something redemptive in his behavior, because he was able to schlep in the Nasham of
exactly. Rus. That was the kavanah ultimately of how this happened. Yeah. Okay, the Gemara Darshans here another pasuk that says over there in Divrei Hayamim. Heima hayotzrim v'yoshve netayim and v'godra or gedera im hamelech b'malachta yashvim sham. So what is this pasuk speaking about? It's a pasuk that the Gemara is bringing because it's in the same place there in Divrei Hayamim, after the pasuk that was quoted before. Heima hayotzrim, who are these yotzrim? Elu b'nei Yonadav ben Rechev, which is mentioned in Psukim and Yirmiyah. Shenotzru shvua saviem. They kept the oath that the father made with them that they shouldn't drink wine, they shouldn't build any houses. Netayim, when it says here Netayim, who's this referring to? Zesh Zu Shloima. This refers to Shloima HaMelech. Shodaimel Netia b'Malchusay. In his kingdom, he was like a fresh tree that's planted that slowly grows and expands and gets greater and greater. That's how his kingdom was as well. Or Gedeira, and they put up a fence. Who is this? Zu Sanhedrin. This refers to the Sanhedrin. Shogadru Pirtziseim Shal Yisrael. They make the different decrees for Yidden and put up fences for Yidden that they shouldn't do Averis. With the king in his work, they sat there. Who is this referring to? Zu Rus Samoyavia. This refers to Rus. She lived to see the kingdom of Shlomo HaMelech, which is Ben Benoi Shel Beno. her great-great-grandchild, she lived to see his melucha. Shenem, as it says, Vayosem kisei le'eim hamelech, that there was a chair that was placed there for the mother of the king. It doesn't mean the mother, or what it means, the imo shel malchus, it refers to Va'avamer Rabbi Elazar le'imo shel malchus, the great-great-grandmother, which refers to Rus, that was still alive at that time. Tana Rabbanon, and a brayso we learned in connection to what we spoke before about the produce in Eretz Yisrael. So we learned in the brayso, the pasuk says, "Va'achaltem min atvui yoshan," that you will eat. This is the brachas that it says in Parshas Bechukaisai, that you will eat from the tvua, even the ones that are already old. What does this mean? Beloy salmantain. There won't be any salmantain in your tvua. What's the pshat of this? My beloy salmantain. So the Gemara brings two opinions. Rav Nachman Oma beloy retzinta. It means there won't be any worms that will eat up your tvua in the storehouses. Rav Sheshes Amar, it means below shedifa. There won't be this warm wind that comes. Then, if the climate is too warm, no, it's something else. If the climate is too warm, then you can't store the wheat because if it's too warm, it doesn't stay fresh. So there won't be moldy. That warm wind. Yeah, it could become moldy, right? So it won't be this warm wind. Now, the Gemara brings two braises that says like these two opinions. Tanyik v'aseh Rav Sheshes and Tanyik v'aseh Rav Nachman. Tanyik v'aseh Rav Nachman. We learned in the braise like Rav Nachman. V'achaltem yoshan. The pasuk says you'll eat from the older wheat from the previous seasons. Yachol, I would think, Yisrael mitzapen l'chodosh mipnei yoshan shakala. I would think the Yidden would be waiting for the new harvest, for the new produce, because of the old that's already kala, that's already gone. So this lashon of kala is mashma like the pshat that the worms eat it up already. Tamad laima that won't happen. Ad bait wasa, ad shetavei tvue me'elel. That they'll still have from the old. And they're not going to be sitting and waiting for the new. The new you'll be patient for it to ripen completely because you still have from the old. Tanya Kvasei that Rav Sheshes. Then in another brayso we learned that's mashma like Rav Sheshes said. V'achaltem min atvui yoshan, you'll eat still from the old. Yachol yi Yisrael mitzapen l'chodosh. You would think that Yidden will wait for the new harvest. Mipnei yoshan shera, because of the old that was stored that will become ra. So this is mashma, not that it was kala, not that it was eaten up by the worms, but ra means that it became moldy because of the warm climate, that it didn't stay fresh. That you have enough from the old, but the new will just come in and it's in its right time. Another brayso we learned what explains this pasuk. V'achaltem yoshan noishan. You'll still have in your storehouses will be full from the old tvua from the previous seasons because it'll be so much malamed. This teaches shekala meyushan mechaveda that in those times when there's such a blessing, the ones that are older have a yafa mechaveda. They're even better quality. They don't get worse. Adarab, but the more you leave it, the better it becomes. I would think that this means there are certain things that if you leave them, the older that you leave them, certain fruits, if you leave them and they dry, they become better. So you would think maybe it only refers to those things that it's natural to be this way. Even those kinds of fruits and produce that it's not the derech, that they stay fresh and they are still good and they become better. There are things that naturally they would rot. Minayin, how do I know that the bracha and the pasuk is that they would remain fresh as well? Talmud Laima, Yoshan, Noishan, it says a double expression, we call Makam, that all the produce, all will remain fresh and get better as the time goes along. Then the pasuk says, V'Yoshan, Nipnei Chadash, Teitziu, that you'll have to take out what's old in the storehouses because of the new that comes in. Melamed, Shahaya Eitzreis, Meleyes Yoshan, that their storehouses were filled with the old produce. And gronois, malay and chadash, and in the piles in the field are already filled with the new. And Yisrael and Yidden were saying, what do we have to do here? We have too much from the old and too much from the new. We have to take out from the storehouses to make place for the new wheat that comes in or from the new produce that comes in. Rav Papa said about this, Kol mili atika ma'alya. Everything that you leave, that it should become old, gets improved in its quality. Levar mitamre, besides dates, v'shichra, and beer, v'harsana, and small fish, maybe herring, a small fish that when you leave it to be old, it does not improve in its quality. Hadran Allah hamecheres asfina. We shall return to you the fifth Perek of Masechta Bava Basra.